Whatever you're saving up for, a CD from Sandy Spring Bank lets you grow your savings at a guaranteed rate. Right now, earn interest at 4.5% APY on an 8-month CD special or 4.25% APY on a 14-month CD special. Learn more at sandyspringbank.com/CD specials. Minimum opening deposit to earn the annual percentage yield is $500 for the 8-month CD special and $2,500 for the 14-month CD special. Member FDIC.
I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to the new podcast presented by the female film critics of InSession Film. We are speaking, we love movies, we are women in session. Ms. Zita Short of the 300 Passions podcast is here joining me again tonight. I'm Kirstin Battestella, also at Therefore Review. And we wanted to talk about musicians who became actors. And I already hear all of our dear listeners with the collective groan, Miss Zita, because in today's mind, we do have a little bit of a hesitancy with this. People who want to cross over, and you know, you're a 30s film aficionado, and I feel like our kind of pushback is a much more recent thing, where you know, the early musicals, almost since the beginning of sound film, I feel it was almost in the past expected of classic actors to be able to be all-around performers, to quote, do it all. Zita?
No, I can understand what you're saying. I think when most people think of musicians turned actors, they are not thinking of, say, Doris Day, who had an extremely successful recording career at the same time as she was starring in all of those popular Rock Hudson rom-coms and earning Oscar nominations. I think we tend to think of, say, the rock era when we talk about musicians nowadays. So Mick Jagger appearing in Performance, or David Bowie in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. And then, of course, on the other side of it, you tend to have female pop stars too. And one of the most successful examples in that realm is Barbra Streisand. But even that is different because she has a musical theatre background. So she's already straddling both disciplines. So it gets a bit complicated. I really wanted to talk about this because I wish it happened more often. I know it's common for people to sort of groan about it and to think, oh God, this person is becoming overexposed. I already have to listen to their songs on the radio. Why do I have to see them on screen? I think it can be interesting as an experiment to insert someone whose talents lie in certain areas onto the screen. And often you notice that, yes, they are inept in certain ways. They do not have the polish of a trained actor. But there can be something fascinating in, say, reflecting on their star persona as a musician. And on certain occasions, it's very rare, but you do get these musicians who do manage to successfully transition all the way to a point where you don't find yourself thinking, ooh, this is a sort of novelty experience that I'm seeing Frank Sinatra up on the screen. And I would like it if that happened more often. Of course, I don't think that Charlie D'Amelio deserves to become one of the great actresses of our time. But I think it can be more interesting than people think it will be. And in the case of, say, Madonna, who gets crapped on a lot for being a bad actress and for trying to succeed as an actress too many times, even though she had so many very public failures, I find it sort of admirable that she just kept coming back for more. And I wish that she had been a good actress, because you watch, say, Desperately Seeking Susan, and the presence is there. She is a fascinating human being to watch on screen. The problem is just that she's not especially good at inhabiting other human beings or playing roles, and it does really seem like she's uncomfortable having to take on accents or thinking about someone's backstory. So that can be a source of frustration.
Yes, I think we'll bounce around all over the place because, when I think of Madonna, it's so funny. I love her moment in Die Another Day. It's not a good Bond movie by any means. And it's like she comes in, fencing. There's a couple of the, little Bond innuendos we expect. And she passes on the villainous information and it moves on. And I'm like, this is a great moment. This is a perfect scene. She does everything she's supposed to do. There's a nudge, a wink, a smile. It's important to the plot, but it's moved along. And it's so funny. I feel kind of bad saying that because I'm like, that's not fair to Madonna. And you hit on a note about, it's not so much performance, but it's a lot of the charisma. Nobody expects Mick Jagger to be a great actor or David Bowie to be a great actor, but it's just the fact that they're there is so, I don't know, it's a given that it's like, this is going to be a great moment of the movie just because of who they are, as opposed to in the past. It's like, I don't think Marilyn Monroe was a great dancer, but it was like she was expected to do huge musical dance number routines, but Rosemary Clooney was the singer, but she didn't dance so well either. But yet it was like there was always going to be an album that goes along with some of these movies, And I like Desperately Seeking Susan. I haven't seen Dick Tracy in ages. I'm not even sure if it's available anywhere, but I just remember being completely fun to see, Warren Beatty and Al Pacino, start going like goofy crazy in this kind of movie. But I feel like Madonna has limited range as an actress, and I feel like I know I've become my parents, because I remember being a kid with her in the first Video Music Awards wearing like the white lingerie bridal stuff and kind of humping and rolling all over the stage, and my parents going, she can sing, she can dance, why does she have to wear her underwear on the outside? And I remember many years later Miley Cyrus doing all the twerking and bumping and grinding. I was watching with my nieces and I thought, she has an incredible voice, why does she have to stand on stage wearing nothing in order to have her voice heard? And I thought, I've become my parents now, the way each generation looks at this differently. But I feel like it's kind of sad that now Madonna's almost viewed as a parody of herself, because she was the master of reinvention. Like A League of Their Own, we discussed in our sports, is just so wonderful. The perfect kind of saucy, sarcastic kind of role. And she's always doing something on Instagram now, unfortunately. And I think if she wanted to be popular again, I think all she would have to do is re-release her sex book. I feel like there's an entire generation who missed out on that. And now we've got, all these conservative extremes, unfortunately. And I just feel like that would get on like such wonderful fire. So it's like this renewed relevance, I think. And I feel like there's a difference between Streisand when you brought her up, because I feel like she's the last of that old school model, coming from musical stage and having albums and having films where she doesn't have to sing, number one, where she could just be taken as an actress. So maybe Cher came from variety TV, I guess, which is slightly different, but each of these musicians had to have a specific avenue into getting into acting.
And in the case of Madonna, I think she's fantastic in Dick Tracy. I think it's the movie as a whole, I've always found to be a bit of a bore. Warren Beatty does nothing for me, especially at that point in his career. I was baffled by the fact that movie tries to present him as though he's still a 25-year-old matinee idol. And I thought, you're washed up. You're past your prime. This is embarrassing. Let's not do this. But in the case of Madonna, in terms of the public perception of her nowadays, I feel as though that happens to every star who lives to be her age. And I think people tend to forget with other musical icons, say Frank Sinatra, for example. I'm certain that there was a point in the 70s and 80s where he, whenever he would appear in public, did seem like a parody of himself. I think it's very difficult if you have achieved that level of public recognition to avoid falling into that trap. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Most of the time when you sadly pass away, people tend to forget about the last 20 or 30 years of your life, and they just think back on your heyday. So I don't think she should have any real concerns about her legacy being tarnished or people thinking that she's embarrassing. And I think with ageism in the industry too, when you're a pop star at her age, it's sort of impossible to remain relevant and hip and hot. And so I think it's sort of expected what's happened to her. And unlike a lot of other older stars, I would argue that she's not embarrassing herself in the same way. She's not a Trump supporter, thank goodness. She's not out there endorsing pseudo-scientific concepts. So I think she's doing just fine for someone in that position. And then, God, what were we talking about? Oh, Barbara Streisand. She's from a very different mold, because you do read about her early career, and one of the things that really launched her was appearing in I Can Get It For You Wholesale and Funny Girl on stage. So she already had this background as an actress by the time she appeared in the film adaptation of Funny Girl in 1968. So again, I feel as though she's not really germane to our discussion, because I don't think people were shocked when she made that transition. Whereas David Bowie, I think, is a sort of perfect test subject for this conversation, because he's someone who, like Madonna, struggled to break through. I would say people didn't fully take him seriously. However, I think unlike Madonna, he does get credit for taking a lot of risks, working with interesting directors, and trying to challenge himself in ways that she didn't, sometimes unsuccessfully. But you do watch a film like The Man Who Fell to Earth, and you think, well, none of the rock stars or pop stars that we have today would dare to make a film that's this artistically challenging and daring and shocking in many ways.
Well, I like The Hunger as well. I feel like horror is another gateway, I think, where it's okay for people to be weird or make their appearances, like the goofy Dracula 2000, where you have the vitamin C is standing next to her CD in like the record store, the kind of wink wink. And you're right, David Bowie is different from Streisand school, because if you're talking about show tunes, is different compared to pop, as you've said. And how much of this, of course, is coming right at the time of, video killed the radio star, where, it's people who needed just the voice. Yes, that did unfortunately become true. I got into a debate not that long ago with my niece, and she said that the George Michael videos looked kind of silly. And I'm like, but that's not the point. Listen to the great songs, but then you also had people who thrived because of video, Madonna being one of them. And I don't know, the 80s was also like the television, the soap opera gateway, Rick Springfield, Jack Wagner, I had their records, you know what I mean? So that, I feel, was another crazy time of like the capitalized on the teen magazines and released the records, which was different from the musicals that had soundtracks. And, I love Sinatra, but I don't know that you do you?
Oh, I'm of two minds about him. He's a great singer. He is. I really enjoy listening to a lot of his classic, iconic tunes. I think he has that great way of speak singing, which is really distinctive to him. And I'll definitely bop along to My Way if I hear it playing on the radio. I have nothing against him in that regard. He's very talented. He deserves the success that he had. At the same time, as a celebrity, in terms of his public persona, he just seems so obnoxious to me. Whenever you read about the Rat Pack, I cannot imagine them being considered cool. They just seem so lame to me. And it's so sad that he, in every friendship group that he had to be the top dog. And all of his supposed friends all had to be completely deferential to him. They have to be these lapdogs who are totally subservient. And I just, honestly, it makes him seem weak and pathetic that he cannot handle hanging out with people who do not revere and worship him. Anyway, that's just something that comes to mind whenever I watch, say, Ocean's 11. The original is bad. People forget that, unfortunately. Anyway, very talented, though. I'm suspicious of people who worship Frank Sinatra's sort of celebrity image, great singer and oddly great actor, which is not something that I expected. I assumed that he was just a flash in the pan in the 50s. But no, he has several great performances recorded on celluloid. You watch something like Some Came Running or The Man with the Golden Arm, and he really takes your breath away. I'm impressed by the fact that he has such a minimalistic acting style. He is willing to really sort of tone it down when he's on screen. And I do think that makes him different to some of the other big leading men of that period. And he really holds his own against, say, Shirley MacLaine, which is shocking because she's this legend, this icon, and you would think that he would be completely out of his depth next to her. And I remember being surprised that, oh no, they work quite well together. But then again, I keep criticizing him, sorry. On occasion, there are several films that he's appeared in where he appears to be the laziest actor, and in particular the musicals that he starred in. And reading up on all of them, the problem in all of these cases seemed to be that they cast a bigger leading man opposite him, and he was upset by the fact that he didn't receive the leading role, and so because he had to play the second banana, he just decided to phone it in and to give nothing of himself to these parts. And so you watch Anchors Away or Guys and Dolls, and he is an active drag on both of those films for no reason. He could have tried. He could have brought something to the table.
Take Me Out to the Ball Game. That's another one. They're fun for what they are, those kind of musicals. But he's a person, I guess, who we don't necessarily think of as having reinvented himself, because now we just think of the persona of Frank Sinatra, chairman of the board, blue eyes types. But he, was like the young crooner. His voice changed, problems with that. Then he moved into the acting. So yeah, and at the same time, also, I have a bunch of his albums where, again, there were albums that coincided with the musicals. So I feel like he thought it was kind of a chore to do both, where he was more like, I want to be one or the other to take seriously. And then, you do get something like From Here to Eternity. I like Suddenly not The Manchurian Candidate, A Hole in the Head. Yeah, The Manchurian Candidate. I like ones where, yes, he's much more serious and there's a little cynicism to it. And then you are getting albums at the same time, like In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning, where it's the times were changing from the post-war kind of crooners to the 50s, where, we'll talk about Elvis, I suppose, going rock and roll coming on, but Sinatra being much more mature and being dark. And you're right, he didn't have that kind of over-the-top acting style Pal Joey is another one I think is kind of cute. But I love Rat Pack movies. We could probably talk about Rat Pack movies more. I love Robin and the Seven Hoods. It's a bad movie, but it's just so much fun. I can't help myself. And you're right, what you said about Sinatra's kind of larger than life, always having to be top dog kind of attitude. But when you see some of his really great performances, you're like, oh, I kind of see where he did have a certain magnetism about him. And he didn't do very much after the 70s, I don't think. He was much more of I remember there being lots of shows around here, I think in New York or Atlantic City, where it was just Frank Sinatra's going to stand there and sing and kind of half know the words to his songs. And that was okay because he was Frank Sinatra. Maybe that was also a local Italian thing. I don't know. But like I said, to me, it's like the 50s and the 80s seem to be like the big times where it was like there was a lot of crossover song and dance. And, like I loved Rick Nelson, too, as a kid watching Ozzie and Harriet. But even that TV show became, let's just have an excuse for Rick to sing, and then he's in Rio Bravo, which, of course, though, there has to be a moment where him and Dean Martin sing just because that's what they do. Kind of thing. And I could see, particularly Rick Nelson was very, tired of that kind of the teen idol cliche stuff. But do you like Elvis, Miss Zita?
Oh, well, again, wonderful singer. And I'll admit that I was not overly familiar with some of the deeper cuts until recently. I had only heard sort of the greatest hits, the big songs that everyone listens to, but he has such a beautiful voice. And I know that he's controversial for many valid reasons. I do think it's fair to have a discussion about his relationship with the Black community and the question of whether it was fair for him to co-opt the style of music that they played. At the same time, I do think that a lot of that music holds up, is still great to listen to, and you still understand why it seemed so revolutionary at the time. On screen, I haven't seen nearly as many of his films as I should have, but Viva Las Vegas is a delight. It's a complete cream puff of a movie. There's not much going on, but he and Anne Margaret are great together. And I think this was something that he maybe needed more of in his other films. There's often a sense that he's sort of out on his own on a life raft in those movies, desperately trying to stay alive. And I think having someone to bounce off of really helped him. Of course, you have all of those famous dance sequences where Anne Margaret essentially tries to dislocate her hips. It's insane. But that movie is a lot of fun to watch. I know that his films are not held in very high regard critically, and there is this question of why did he not try to become a serious actor? I think my contention there is that I don't necessarily think that these singers should have to appear in a serious drama about drug addiction in order to be taken seriously. I think if they want to make light musical comedies, that's great. You can make masterpieces in that genre. The problem with the Elvis movies is that less and less effort was put into packaging them. And there's definitely a sense that the wheels were starting to fall off towards the end.
Viva Las Vegas is the best of the musical films that he did in the 60s. And most of them are, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. Girls or Fun in Acapulco. I mean, to me, there's no difference between them when you get down to it. And part of that is, unfortunately, because they were movies that were made to sell the records. He just breaks out in the song because it's for the sake of the album that goes along with them. I really love the couple films he did in the late 50s, Jailhouse Rock and King Creole and Flaming Stars a little bit after that, the Western. But Jailhouse Rock is relatively not bio, but a person who comes up singing and they do the different song routines and everything. There's a reason for the music to be there, just like King Creole, where he's singing in the club. And there's some great music in that. And there's Walter Matthau is in that, where you're right. There's more support. There is a more serious element to those black and white films, and I think, well, there's one song, I guess, in Flaming Star, the song of Flaming Star, but then it just became this, well, no, we're just going to perceive Elvis as the product, which is disappointing, because he, it's sad that it's like, oh, I wanted to see more of the serious movies that come along. And it's so funny, because then you get the 1968 comeback special that he did on TV, and you did kind of have a lot of people, times changing, 68, a very heavy year. And you probably did have a lot of people being like, oh, Elvis, swinging his hips from 55. That's so, what a different world away, kind of post-Kennedy, everything happening. And then you get the 68 comeback special, and you're like, wow, the power, the charisma, the wonderful music. And again, you think, yeah, it was kind of sad that the films that he made aren't really a reflection of him being a great performer, a great singer, or even a great actor. But it's sad. And then you do have television come along at the time too, like Cher doing all the variety specials, and even doing like the Scooby-Doo cartoon. I think that they were on too. But then she didn't become an actress though up until the 80s, did she?
No, she waited a while to transition into films, and obviously she has a very fruitful career for a couple of years. And then I'm sort of disappointed by the fact that seemingly she won the Academy Award and then decided, okay, I'm going to pack it in. I don't really want to do any more of this. And she has had plenty of film roles since then, but there is a level of ambition on display in the 80s that seems to have decreased following the award win for Moonstruck. And I think that's really a shame. I wish she had kept hacking away at it, kept working with these top directors, and she seems to have dropped the ball a bit.
I didn't even realize, I've forgotten, she was in Silkwood, Mask, Suspect, The Witches of Eastwick, I mentioned before that I love, Moonstruck, and Mermaids. That kind of window was like Cher hitting it out of the park every single time. And it's funny, this probably is more about ageism at a point, not that they were women who crossed over, whether Streisand's debatable, the way she moved into directing, around this time. And it's like, did Cher kind of age out? She played the mother to Winona Ryder kind of thing. And it's like Hollywood comes to a point of we're done with you, whether you're talented or not. But then you also, the 90s was too cynical to have song and dance musical people, as opposed to today. I guess things are swinging back around. I said to you before, like, where does Jennifer Lopez fall on the scale?
I guess
which we debated.
Yeah, she doesn't really qualify either, because she was a dancer on television, but she achieved fame as an actress before releasing her first pop album. So she is a dancer turned actress turned singer. So the phenomenon is sort of flipped. And I don't think we can really consider her among this group or this handful of musicians that we are discussing. At the same time, it is intriguing that she seemingly picked music stardom over cinema. She does appear in a lot of movies in the late 90s and early 2000s, but as time goes on, you do get the sense that she's putting more effort and more time into those pop albums. And good for her, in a way. I love a lot of her music. I think it's incredible that she has managed to stay relevant for this long, and all of those periods of reinvention that she's had to go through. At the same time, I do wonder whether her acting career might be a bit more impressive if she hadn't got into pop music. But as I've said, I like her pop, so I'm not going to be too upset about it. I like the fact that we have Jenny on the block and Waiting for Tonight.
I tweeted not that long ago, I was listening to something and I realized all the music that I like is 20th century music. I don't really have anything that's 21st century. And I thought, wow, I feel old. And it's funny, the way today I feel like you almost have to diversify, maybe not in J-Lo bouncing back and forth song and dance and music, and she did television, but today, like I said, people on Instagram influencing, selling separate products and things like that. But it's in the old school studio system. I feel like a lot of these people would have thrived, because it was like, here's the movie, you have to do a musical, we're going to train you to sing and dance, and we'll sell the albums. It doesn't matter if it's bad or not, or you will be successful in both, and we will continue to prop you up. So I feel like without the studio system, everybody, we've said it several times, these people have to keep reinventing themselves and using each of their talents whenever they strike. So, and again, today is America. We love to put people on a pedestal and we love to tear them down. So if somebody had a bad album and then they decide they want to make the movie again, we'll poo-poo them. And it's funny, for many years, I remember Jared Leto being more famous for being in the 30 Seconds to Mars. But then all of a sudden he, came along to Oscar acclaim. And I was kind of like, really? The kid who was on like My So-Called Life, who was in the big band, is now like an Oscar winning actor? Like, oh, okay. And I guess as much as the audience has a little bit of hesitancy today, ironically, awards seem to come calling the moment somebody changes, like, oh no, now they're being a serious actress. Like I said to you, I've never seen anything with Lady Gaga. But yet I know she's been all kinds of nominated for lots of different things. And it's funny, I don't listen to modern music, but I know who all the people are just because of social media and marketing and everything being in your face. Is Lady Gaga a good actress?
I think she is, and I love her as a star. As much as I talked about how I hate Frank Sinatra's public persona, I think Lady Gaga is fabulous. I love the fact that she clearly enjoys being famous. And for so many stars, it's a common refrain that, oh, I wish I weren't famous. I hate this. I just want to do my job. And I think that Lady Gaga seems to relish going to the premieres and doing the photo shoots and being interviewed on the biggest stage possible. She turns awards campaigning into a form of performance art. It is wildly entertaining to watch. And I hope that she becomes an awards contender every single year, because she brings so much passion to it, and I have to respect that.
Now, Machete Kills and Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, I guess, were small appearances. But then, of course, there was the big song, a remake again of A Star Is Born, House of Gucci, and now the Joker sequel. So it's, I remember, for as much as Oscar nominations, there's also a lot of mocking. And the way you said, she enjoys the campaign. I mean, isn't that part of the performance, that you are supposed to go along with it? I mean, you are selling yourself. I remember her wearing a dress made of meat as some kind of protest statement. But I guess I don't think that she's made a lot of music recently since she's moved on to acting. But then we also have someone huge like Beyonce, who, can headline the Super Bowl. And I'll tell you something, it's a separate issue. I don't understand why women today, female singers, have to wear practically no clothing in order to sing. To me, it's like, if you've got a voice, you could stand up there and sing, But today it's Nicki Minaj is letting it all out, Lizzo's letting it all out, and I don't even know these people from their music. I only know them from being controversial. And then when Beyonce wants to go be in a horror movie as big as she is, it's almost like people are like, no, we want to see you half naked singing. That's it.
No. But I think there's an important distinction to be made between how that phenomenon works in the modern day. I think that now it very much feels as though those women are in control of their own images and their own bodies, and they are proud of how sexually attractive they are, and they want to be able to flaunt that without being judged. Whereas I think even in the 80s, for example, there was an element of coercion involved in it. And the women who did choose to wear less than other women were publicly ridiculed for it. And so I would say that it's a positive development that now women can get away with being scantily clad. There isn't any judgment anymore. Well, hopefully not. Sorry, I'm being far too idealistic. They still face all sorts of harassment. But I think it's a good thing that someone like Beyonce is such a sex positive figure and suggests that you can be this major pop star and you can be a sex symbol and you can still be respected.
Well, again, that we circle back to Madonna when she was making, scandalous videos, "Open Your Heart," and the Peep Show with the corsets and tassels on, Vogue, all the cone bras and everything. And so many people found that so scandalous. And were probably threatened by, I guess, a powerful woman taking ownership of something like that. Whereas now it's like, all the women are choosing to take off their clothes because they can. I don't know. And I said the video killed the radio star kind of thing. The 80s, it was, did I say Rick Springfield and Jack Wagner? It was soap operas. And like, I know Kylie Minogue, I feel, is an interesting case because she was big in Australia with music, but didn't really land in the US until she became like a comedy actress. And we had the opposite. I feel like, I guess we already had Madonna. We didn't need anybody else. So I feel like we kind of came around to her music kind of late. Another person who, however you can enter the market is how you enter the market. And Biodome is a fun movie, but I mean, it's not meant to be taken seriously.
I think a big thing with Kylie Minogue is, again, she's not a singer turned actress. She's an actress turned singer. She appeared on Neighbours for many years, and I think her primary fan base is in Britain, where Neighbours was hugely popular. Even though it's an Aussie show, I believe it was sort of most popular over there. It presented these British people with this vision of warm, sunny Australia, where a bunch of beautiful people are falling in and out of love. And she transitions to being a pop star in the late 80s. And I believe, I know she has an audience in the US, but from what I understand, she has always been much bigger in Britain and Australia than she has been over there.
Because, of course, we like to think that the American acceptance and approval is what's paramount to these people. But yet we allow people, like when Keanu Reeves says he's got a band on the side, when we do the opposite, when actors decide they want to release a little bit of an album. Damian Lewis, I think, just put out some music. Luke Evans has an album out. It's like we almost kind of applaud them, like, well, okay, that's cute. That's nice of you to do that on the side, but don't quit your day job type of thing. We still have this kind of animosity. And I wanted to ask you, particularly A Star Is Born, do you have a favorite adaptation? Because that's been done numerous times. Of course, Streisand did it. The Judy Garland, there was one before that. Do you have a favorite?
My favorite is the 1937 version. I think it's the most it's the most formally impressive. I'm fascinated by the sort of Art Deco aesthetic that they adopted. I think it has the most to say about the deleterious effects that fame can have on a young woman. It really talks about the sort of blurring of the public and the private, and the sense that as a celebrity, you lose the ability to distinguish between the real emotions that you feel and the public response to it. and what people want you to feel, what they project onto you. And you really do become a cog in this machine. And so to me, that's the most tragic, the most cynical, the most hard-hitting of the adaptations. The 1954 version is not my cup of tea. The 2018 version has its... Okay, we won't even talk about the 1976 version. That's just a dumpster fire of a film, a disaster on all levels. But the 2018 version is solid. I think it successfully updates the story for the modern era. I think Lady Gaga is very good in the leading role. It doesn't quite give me that sort of emotional gut punch that I think is intended, but it does say something that the hit songs from the film did actually make an impact. People loved Shallow, people loved the But song, and that's not something that you often get from these films. So often you cringe in these movies where they try to convince you, oh yes, this is a hit single, and it sounds so generic. And you think, no one would ever purchase this. No one would put down their hard-earned money in order to buy this. And this movie does manage to get away with that. It's not Purple Rain, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Purple Rain because I've been going through a Falcon Crest rewatch, and there's a season where Apollonia is on the show, and she's playing a singer who's going to the clubs and on the radio station and getting involved in this stuff. And I feel like if someone weren't alive in the 80s and was watching the show now, they'd be like, why are they doing this storyline? Who is this person? Why is this on the show? And it's like they obviously did it because they wanted to capitalize on Purple Rain and be young and hip and cool. But it's not her fault, but it's completely out of place on the show. And it's like, wow, I'm glad that storyline's over when they get rid of that. And I feel like people don't understand that the shoehorning in of the entertainment, because we just expect to be entertained. We expect everything to be good. We don't want people to quit their day job. If they're good at the singing and they're good at the acting, we love them. But I think the audience fails to realize, I don't like this phrase skill set, but it does take a lot of difference between an actor who's playing a role, who's performing, and someone who, if they're writing and singing their own songs, where they're putting their own emotions out to the audience, if they're singing live, getting that kind of feedback. But it's interesting that the studio contract system is kind of very similar to the recording contract, where it's not necessarily always them writing their own songs and being on tour. It's a lot of this, no, you release this song because this song we say is going to be the single, someone else wrote it and it's got the hooks and it's going to be popular, and you have to record that kind of thing. So I feel like it's a particularly narrow window, but obviously musicians, I feel, thrive in films that are about music and about, the rise and fall of, kind of the singers. And but at the same instance, I think we can see when that doesn't work. When you have something like, as much as I love it, the Monkees, a band who's created for a TV show. And I love that show when I was a kid. And then I remember years ago putting it on for my nieces. And I remember thinking, what did I ever think in this show? This show's bad. Go ahead.
No, the Monkees are an interesting case, because I do think, unlike other constructed boy bands, I know that they were sort of one of the first in that regard. And to their credit, they do have several hit singles that people still listen to. Daydream Believer has not been forgotten. It has not been washed away with the tide like all of these other forgettable pop tunes from that period. It's still catchy. And honestly, I like their aesthetic. I like their whole look. Yes, they are very clearly the knockoff Beatles, and they are an ersatz version of the Beatles. But even that is pretty good. For a completely constructed band, you do have to appreciate the fact that they cranked out some pretty great music for a couple of years. So sorry for that side tangent, but talking about this effort to sort of shoehorn music into the narratives of the films that these musicians turned actors appear in, one figure who really stands out to me is Bobby Darin. And one thing that we talk about a lot on this episode is the fact that these actors end up taking sort of crap roles because in most cases they are inexperienced and they want a big studio to shepherd them through this process. And so they end up in some mainstream film that isn't especially exciting to hardcore cinephiles, and it ends up being a big disappointment. In the case of Bobby Darin, he worked with John Cassavetes, the godfather of American independent cinema. And I know that Too Late Blues isn't seen as one of his best films, but it's still a fascinating experiment to have this extremely popular mainstream rock star from that period in this cutting-edge film that really does seem like it's trying something new. It's trying to say something about the commercial exploitation of artists, and not many musicians take that sort of risk. So credit to him for agreeing to do that, for putting together this weird little movie that did not reach a massive audience. And I think it's admirable when you do get musicians who are willing to go there. And then at the same time, you have Mick Jagger, who I feel we also need to address, who does have a couple of notable film roles. I think his most famous movie is probably Performance, where he plays kind of a version of himself. And I remember having a very conflicted response to that film. So I wonder, Kirstin, have you seen it? And if so, what did you think of it?
Not in 100 years. I haven't seen it in a very long time. I came around at a time, like I don't really love all of the Rolling Stones. I like a lot of their early 60 things because I saw the music videos in the 80s with the Rolling Stones being old, when they're giants, climbing over the city. And I remember thinking, like, what is the big deal about Mick Jagger? I'm not impressed. They're all old and gnarly, which again to me was video killed the radio star. I remember loving REO Speedwagon until I saw their music videos, and then I was like, whoa, okay. So no, I was kind of put off by Mick Jagger, which is terrible. I know, perhaps, and I don't think that he was very good when he did his acting that I had seen. I just wasn't impressed. Maybe Ned Kelly, I think is the thing I saw that I was like, eh.
But I think he's another example of one of those figures who is too big as a musician to successfully make it as an actor. There is this struggle to sort of differentiate him from his onstage persona.
Yeah, I could not separate that he was supposed to be a big, huge rock star to, oh, now I'm supposed to take you as a serious actor. I don't see it. And then it's funny because I feel bad that there's certain people that we got the opposite. Like I love, the Hard Day's Night. I love the chances we got to see the Beatles on screen, which is slightly different. But you kind of think, why didn't they do more of that? Probably because they didn't want to. They didn't want to be shoehorned into that route. But also someone like Diana Ross, had a couple great films, and we think, okay, why didn't she do more? But I don't know. But then you're right. But yet when people think of Diana Ross, most people don't think of today, Mahogany or Lady Sings the Blues. They think of her being, just a larger than life diva. So sometimes it doesn't work, even if they're equally talented. It's just, if you're too much of one, it compromises who you are as an actor. I don't know. Or maybe today, a great example of that is probably Taylor Swift, for better or for worse. I'm not a fan of hers.
Well, she, to be fair, hasn't made much of an effort to branch out into acting. She had that one big failure with Valentine's Day, I believe it was called, but she hasn't really headlined a film in her career. On occasion, she shows up in a very small part in a movie, And so I would say, in comparison to someone like Madonna, who really did put herself out there, was the lead in movies that cost tens of millions of dollars to make and received massive promotion. Taylor Swift hasn't really gone down that route. And again, maybe this is why I find Madonna more fascinating as a cultural icon, because she does have these huge public, high profile failures, and yet she just kept going. And she made a lot of the same mistakes twice. Whereas Taylor Swift seems a lot more cautious and hesitant as a celebrity.
I feel like that Taylor Swift thinks that because she's such a huge musician, she can dabble in acting and that the masses will follow her. And I really don't think that works. I mean, I didn't watch the new Cats musical, which again, as I said, if we back up to the way in the past people were expected to be triple threats, and the way it was acceptable to come from stage and big productions, I'm not even sure of her name. The trailers were bad enough of that. But the girl who was actually the main character in that Cats movie, who I believe is a multicultural person, but yet they made her up to be more white. And yes, and her appearance and all the promotion was all completely reduced, even though she had already been acclaimed on stage. But it was like, that's too small to headline this movie. We're going to show all these celebrities where it's like, what the heck are you doing? What the heck is this hot mess? You know, the butthole edition with the cats with their tails and their boobs. It's just, to me, that wasn't a disaster. A disaster. Like, why did you do this? You know, but did you have a favorite Madonna film or favorite disaster of a Madonna film? Because there's a few.
Madonna's filmography, I think I agree with the consensus in thinking that movies like Desperately Seeking Susan, Dick Tracy, and A League of Their Own probably provide the best platform for her to display her talents. At the same time, and this doesn't technically count as a performance, but it is a performance, her documentary, Madonna, Truth or Dare, which is amazing, truly one of the best sort of on-tour documentaries ever made, lets you know so much about this woman, even though she is being completely inauthentic at all times in the documentary. She is so fun just as Madonna in that movie. And I put Madonna in finger quotes because, of course, she is playing Madonna on screen. But you can completely understand, even if you were not alive throughout the 80s or in the early 90s, why this woman was such a big deal. She is funny, she is charming, she is sassy, she's very bratty. She does come across as this brash, petulant young woman, and you can completely get why people were so into it and so enraptured by it. Even if you dislike her, it's difficult not to take an interest in what she's doing. And her music is pretty great too, even though most people would argue that she's not the reason for that. But you do get a real sense of what it would be like to be the most famous woman in the world through that documentary. So I would recommend it to everybody, even if you are not a hardcore Madonna fan.
I wondered if you were going to mention that, if that counted in the conversation, because it came around at exactly like the right time and the right place. I mean, it had this kind of 80s wink, like, where are we going in the 90s, you know, the great transitional kind of time. And yet it was the black and white, the way it was perceived as so kind of risque and edgy, like hard hitting for the 90s. And yet you're getting insights, but yet you're like it's not it is still performance. And again, it's amazing the way this has come around again. Like I said, if she re-released her sex book, even if I'm not sure if this is available or if it should be re-released, but the idea that it's like, this is exactly what celebrities do now. Like we said, it's mocking of where a person has a movie and they also have a song to go along with it or something. And as opposed to, but yet today it's like, oh, a person has to be on social media showing their behind the scenes of what else they're doing. And even if they're doing a print interview, there's got to be like a little slideshow of the photography that goes along with it. Like everything has to have some kind of extra piece of promotion that goes along with the performance that's supposed to, you quote, finger quotes, as we say, you're getting this supposed inside look, but it is still being presented for social media. It is still marketing of like, you know what, go see the movie, go buy that album, you know. And there were really great songs there. And I mean, like she's singing in Vision Quest. She's just like the person in the club singing the song that goes along with it. Not really a good movie. And I don't know, Crazy for You, I guess you think it's kind of a lame kind of song. And I was just listening to the I was just listening to the Immaculate Collection not that long ago because I had these on record and I finally got it on CD. We had it on cassette for many years. And it's when you're looking at a greatest hits album like that, to see the progression of, yes, some of these kind of Lucky Star, Holiday, they've got little catchy little hooks. They're good dance pops, like get into the groove and things like that. But then like when you get up to things like a Prayer, you know, and True Blue, like you're like, okay, these are becoming much more complex, serious kind of songs. And then you think, how much of that at the time? Well, Dick Tracy is like, well, there's Vogue that goes along with it, you know, and you're like, these are still incredible songs, you know. So you can tell the difference between when it was good movies, when there was the good wink, that the line of performance and promotion, but the talent was still there, compared to today, where I feel like it's everyone selling themselves on social media as a product. You can tell doesn't work for everybody. No, but you liked Truth or Dare, Dick Tracy. How do you feel about Evita?
So I've never seen it. I've heard very negative things about the stage musical. I've heard people noting that it has a very limited grasp on the politics of South America. It takes a very condescending view of the plight of the descamisados, and it attempts to whitewash a lot of Eva Perón's criminal activities and her political corruption. And it basically seems to be a musical that's in thrall to this dictator. So that's a shame. But I assume I'll get around to watching it someday. I know that people thought that she might receive an Academy Award nomination for that one.
Well, it's not the music that's the problem in it. I mean, she can hold, you know, all the big notes. I think people were impressed by that, but it was like don't equate you yourself as Madonna to, you know, big, controversial, maybe beloved, but issued, you know, problematic historical figures, you know, kind of like, whoa, stop. And by this point, I guess we're at the mid to late 90s. She toiled in some comedies. I think there was some directing attempts in there. So, but again, at the same instance, even when these were faltering, she had a album or song just called Music, but she's, you know, the queen of invention, continuing to reinvent herself. That's why I feel like it's kind of a shame where it's like, now, oh, you've reached a certain age, you don't have enough, you know, influencing on Instagram, that you must be a hack. And I guess the generations, you know, forget that, like, in some ways, no, the reason we have Instagram influencers in a way is because of Madonna. You know, I just saw a video from one of the costuming kind of folks who were redoing like an 80s goth kind of look. And I thought, I remember being a kid, every year for Halloween, every girl wanted to go as Madonna. And it was very easy to wear, you know, the net kind of shirts off your shoulder and net gloves and lots of bangles and tease your hair up in a ribbon, and, you know, and boom, you were Madonna. You know, so that kind of sticks in your collective consciousness kind of thing. Body of Evidence, I think, is a little weird. It's kind of hammy. But
I think that's the most infamous one.
Yeah, because A League of Their Own and Body of Evidence, I think, came out around the same time. And it's kind of like, well, okay, what happened? And again, we come to maybe here is where she excels with support people, having a good time, being herself, but not, oh, we said this before, what if my, uniform comes open and oops, my bosom falls out. And, you think the world hasn't seen your bosom, to Body of Evidence, where it's like, okay, keep it. We don't need to see, your satin undies anymore kind of thing, but also I guess the point where do we come full circle of I don't think Madonna had to be scandalous to be a good actress or to be a good singer, but it certainly created noise that helped her. And as I said, somebody like the Miley Cyrus doing the little Hannah Montana show and then having to be kind of naked crazy on the Wrecking Ball, scandalous, and then Miley Cyrus was in the A Very Merry Christmas, the Netflix Christmas movie, where again, standing there singing, bellowing great big notes, and you think, why can't we just accept people when they just want to stand there and sing,
I sort of disagree. I think that a hugely important part of being a pop star is turning your personal life into a form of performance art. And so I completely stand in opposition to the idea that, oh, well, art should only be about what you do up on stage, or you shouldn't be allowed to incorporate stagecraft into your performances. You shouldn't be allowed to use scandal to entice people. I think that's wrong. I think that someone having a scandalous personal life, someone having an outrageous public persona, that can really enhance your understanding of their art. And I think if you don't want people to exploit their sexuality, to do scandalous things, then you want to wipe out celebrity culture. You don't want to have cultural icons. I find it very difficult to accept the notion that we would all be happier if celebrities weren't sexy, if they didn't take advantage of the fact that they're attractive, and if we never heard about who they're sleeping with, who they're having an affair with. I love all of that stuff. I am a gossip hound, and I think most people do. So, and I think even today,
that's
sorry.
Sweet. No, it shocks me because you're this sophisticated classic film connoisseur, and now you're like, oh, I love the gossip. I love the gossip.
No. But honestly, I think when we discuss these popular musicians, it is important to take their public image into account. And I think so much of Madonna's legacy is tied up in her public persona. And some of that scandal was just empty spectacle. But at the same time, I do think that she can be credited with shifting the public perception of female sexuality and making it more acceptable for women to really be in control of their own bodies and be sexually confident and not be ashamed of that. And so I'm not upset when I see one of those photographs of her up on stage in her cone bra. And I think something that's really important about it is that she does seem joyous and happy when she's doing those things. And so I think it's a far better representation of a woman being sexually promiscuous and outrageous than, say, the Calvin Klein commercials from the 90s, where you have an ill-looking Kate Moss sort of glowering into the camera in a pair of jeans that are hanging off of her. And on one hand, it promotes sort of negative body image. You have the whole heroin chic movement. No, you don't want young women to look like they're on drugs. And it also sort of promotes this idea that, oh, well, sexuality, it's this thing that the people who are good at it, the people who are cool, they look miserable and depressed all the time. And I think one of the joys of Madonna is that she really celebrates it. She's so out there about it. She doesn't have this pretense of being too cool for school. And I like that about her. At the end of the day, she's a bit of a dog.
I wonder how much technology plays a part in this, because pre-80s, or right at the beginning of the 80s, I guess, like someone like Mama Cass, as you said, was unhappy, and making the transition to doing specials and variety things never got off the ground with her, even though she's one of the greatest voices ever. And Karen Carpenter, the same way. I mean, it literally, killed her trying to fit into these kind of images. Then you have Madonna embracing these kind of things, but making great music. And today it's like, I know who all these people are, as I said, just because of their scandals or the noise that they make, but not because of their music, which I feel like means that they've lost something. And I don't know if that is just the way we handle musically differently, because you're not hearing all the music all the time on the radio. You have to be on your particular, I don't know, Spotify music type thing, where they are putting out a song at a time. Like, it's not even, the album is not a concept kind of anymore. So I guess the way we consume the music is different. And that means that the talent has to change their performance and their persona to kind of keep up with that. So I kind of wonder, when you said someone controversial, you love the mess, I wonder how you feel about Harry Styles.
Oh, I'm bored by him.
I
think
don't really care for him either.
I remember there was the big scandal about 6 months ago, where he sort of attempted to discuss the presentation of gay sex on screen. And there was this big questioning of, well, you have not come out publicly and declared your sexuality, and nobody should have to do that. But there is a sense in some circles that he is queer baiting. And it's a big concern. There's also a concern that he might just be a straight cisgender man who is essentially participating in a form of cultural appropriation and taking the legacy of a lot of important queer artists and taking their art and amalgamating it into something that is a little bit bland, that will appeal to the mainstream, that doesn't quite have the punch or the panache of, say, a Jobriath song. And I do not get it. I think if I were a 13-year-old girl, and for as much as he has changed his public image, now he wants to be taken seriously as a rock star, his core fan base still seems to be made up of preteen girls, which is the way it was when he was a member of One Direction. And I struggle to take him seriously. Mm-hmm. And I don't love his music. So I'm bored by him as a celebrity. Whenever I come across his name in a gossip rag, I don't think, ooh, I have to learn about what he's up to this weekend. Whereas Lana Del Rey's personal life, I find to be fascinating.
Well, that's what I mean. If I'm not listening to their music, it's like, why else are you relevant? And, I remember, I think even my sister, my nieces, they were big into High School Musical, and then they were into One Direction. And I remember my niece saying like, oh, I love One Direction. They're better than the Beatles. And I had to turn away from her. My other niece was like, I'm sorry, she didn't mean it. She just likes those boys, and it's like, yes, how do I grow out of that kind of stigma? Well, I'm going to, borrow, wink, steal to the other kind of, queer audience that's untapped. And I'm going to make, seemingly controversial movies that kind of really fall flat. I mean, Dunkirk is different. That's a small part, but like Eternals, it's funny, I had to click on the filmography to look up, and there's a separate section about personal life, relationships, and sexuality. But Eternals, Don't Worry, Darling, and My Policeman, I've all heard such tepid things. So it's a lot of these people. When we started out, I know I hear the audience groan. I also want to feel like the stop trying to make fetch happen. Why do we continue to have musicians make these weak films?
Yes, he's a big star. I'm not implying that he isn't successful or that he hasn't earned it. But the movies that he's making are disappointing. And hopefully, if he does continue to act, he improves somewhat. And I do think that's possible, to be fair. You look at a lot of early appearances, even from a Frank Sinatra, who I've praised in this episode, and he seems to be a bit lost on screen. And then a couple of years later, he has developed into someone who is more secure in himself on screen. He seems a lot more comfortable interpreting the text. And maybe there's still a chance that Harry Styles could have something that I just haven't noticed yet. But as a celebrity, I wish that he were more interesting.
You know, it's funny. I actually was trying to look up on InSessionFilm.com if we've done any kind of movies with musicians and stars. And I really enjoy, I have to say, when I'm researching through InSessionFilm.com, when I stumble across something old. I did say to JD not that long ago, I was listening to one of these podcasts and they were talking about the Google Plus page for InSession Film. There's an old list here from JD and Brendan about their top performances by musicians. And they've had Doris Day for The Man Who Knew Too Much, Frank Sinatra for The Manchurian Candidate, Cher for Moonstruck, Bjork in Dancer in the Dark. She's another person who never quite caught on in America, I think, just simply because we were like, no, too weird, which is unfair. Did you see that one?
Yes, I did look over it, and I think those are some solid choices. I prefer Doris Day's work in Love Me or Leave Me and Love a Comeback, but I guess the Hitchcock bias is there, so that always wins out. And Björk, she's an interesting figure. I think she was always going to be a bit niche, even when she was at the height of her popularity. She was never going to be as big as Madonna. And I think for someone who fits into that strata of stardom, she was wildly popular in the US.
They have a whole list of honorable mentions here. Queen Latifah in Chicago. I like Chicago. Again, I think it was the right musical for the right time, where it was able to do the swanky deco kind of fantasy kind of big spectacle sequences. So there was like a circumvention of the musical breakout and song kind of thing. I like that one. Queen Latifah was also on a TV show for a really long time, wasn't she? Was it Living Single? I want to say.
I don't know.
But so some people, it's like they do one thing and they're content to kind of disappear. I don't know. Like Eminem hasn't done more since 8 Mile, I don't think. Mary J. Blige was in Mudbound. I don't even remember that. Oh, Beyonce, I forgot, was in Dreamgirls too. But again, that was, to me, that's more of the Jennifer Hudson movie. But I don't know. This is a really interesting list in session. I'd forgotten about some of these things. LL Cool J, Deep Blue Sea. He is good in that. I mean, it's, again, a wonderfully delicious, trashy movie, but it's great. Here's someone we never discussed. Will Smith.
Right. Yes. Technically he can't. But does he? No, because I thought he was on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air before he went into music.
No, he's from like the Philly scene. He was doing music on the radio before that. Like, and I feel like the Parents Just Don't Understand came out right around the same time. And then was on Fresh Prince for all those years, but then also started doing the small roles.
But did he achieve fame as a result of The Fresh Prince instead of becoming a star through his music?
The songs were really popular at the time. Again,
they were, but I feel as though it was more of a concurrent thing instead of him being with DJ Jazzy Jeff and then a couple of years later moving into.
Was also the early 90s, though, where someone could do that. They could be on a TV show and have a music career that were relatively separate from each other and be equally successful. Today, I'm not so sure that would work. There would always be, it's the song from my movie, oh my gosh, Whitney Houston. Yeah, I wish she had done more films. Even though The Bodyguard is kind of a mess, it's fun. I love it. I think she had enough power and enough charisma. The Preacher's Wife is really charming. Oh, she did another one. Oh, is it Waiting to Exhale? I've forgotten. It's so funny looking back at this list that there's a lot of people that you kind of forget dabbled in movies, Huh. Mandy Moore. Britney Spears has had a couple moments in movies too that were like, well, it's a mess, but we're going to allow it. But also at this point, I was beyond this age of that kind of teen bop kind of things in the early aughts, where it seemed like everybody, Jessica Simpson was on TV at the same time, but and Mariah Carey has tried a couple movie appearances, but she's just Mariah Carey. It's, again, she doesn't have to do anything she doesn't want to because she's Mariah Carey, go shatter glass, but
However, Mariah Carey's performances in her music videos are impressive. If you have ever seen the music video for her hit single Obsessed from 2009, in which it's a diss track against Eminem, and it's amazing. So she portrays herself as a beautiful, adored pop diva, but also dresses up as an Eminem type figure who stalks Mariah Carey. And it's brilliant.
I guess that's another thing that's a lost art in itself, the video. It's a whole other can of worms to get into Michael Jackson, but it's like who did dabble in a couple of the Wiz type musical movies, but the elaborate production designs of these videos were just so massive, so incredible. They were short films, and I think some of them were nominated for different awards and things, but it was like, again, that's a lost art. Now we're down to the celebrities on TikTok, kind of thing. Could you narrow down any of your favorite musicians turned actors or their favorite performances?
Well, I suppose Frank Sinatra in Some Came Running comes to mind. Courtney Love is fantastic in The People versus Larry Flint. I think she's a very interesting performer, and I wish that she had worked more back in the 1990s. And then, who else could I name? I suppose Madonna in Desperately Seeking Susan. Very fun movie that I'm sort of disappointed a lot of the kids nowadays don't seem to be watching it, and I think they would love it. It's a really cute, sweet screwball comedy.
Yeah, how do you explain that? It's like, Patricia Arquette. Is it Rosanna?
Rosanna Arquette.
Rosanna, who had the song named after her back then, the 80s. What a fun time. She's pretending that she's Madonna. Basically, that's the movie. And you're like, no, it's wonderful. It's charming. Her and Courtney Love also had that funny beef at the MTV things. You think of all the things that were lost, because they were at crazy MTV stunts, or things that we've forgotten about these musicians because everything just goes in cycles. Sinatra, you're not a fan in From Here to Eternity?
Oh, he's solid in it. I don't understand the Academy Award win. He's okay. It's nothing extraordinary.
We'll have to, I think Amy Thomason wanted to talk about the Rat Pack. We'll have to deep dive into all their films and again, who was fighting with whom and who got kicked out and who got replaced because they didn't get along with Sinatra. Are there any musicians today you'd like to see do more dramatic things on camera?
Lana Del Rey, our greatest modern pop star.
Oh, I would not know. I don't listen. Should I listen?
She's fabulous.
I think I've heard a couple of her songs. She did she do one of the Once Upon a Dream for Maleficent and did it in like a nice low.
I don't think so.
Was that her? Was that Adele? Again, see, I know the people by their names and whatever is going on with them, not their music, so to me, I feel sad when it's the persona overtakes the performance rather than the persona being part of the performance. It's a fine line.
And I don't mind that. I think it can be fun.
And it's a separate conversation. I think we could do all on its own. Velvet Goldmine is a fascinating film in that regard. It's like pseudo David Bowie, craziness, heaviness, Roxy music type things. What was going on there? And I can't really think necessarily. Are any of the kind of films we've dabbled in here, are any of them worthy of your 300 Passions list?
No, I wouldn't say so. We haven't really touched on any romantic dramas.
None with Barbra Streisand?
Oh, I suppose Funny Girl. Yes.
The Way We Were.
oh God. What a dodge.
What are you?
Barbra Streisand rapes Robert Redford in that movie, and you're meant to think that it's fine.
Uh-huh. I feel like she just comes out with the Funny Girl, the awards tie. Like somehow she already had like instant like cred. She's a star. Like I said, that kind of last of the old school Can Do It All, and then just was completely privileged to be like, well, I'm going to direct too, and they're very hit or miss. Oh gosh, there's The Mirror Has Two Faces.
Yentl is fabulous, though.
The what? I'm sorry.
Yentl, her first directorial effort, great. And then I feel that it was downhill from there. I do not like The Prince of Tides, and The Mirror Has Two Faces is far too long.
I feel like I liked half of The Mirror Has Two Faces, which is kind of terrible to say. I'm kind of like, okay, this movie's not over yet. This is going on and on. It's too long. It's too What are you doing at your 300 Passions podcast next?
So I will be talking about the movie A Summer Place with Amy Thomason, who has made frequent appearances on this podcast. So she's a real joy to talk to.
Do you think those big kind of song and dance musicals can come back? Cher tried in, was it 9? But I feel like that was also like 10 years ago, wasn't it?
I don't think Cher was in 9.
A Burlesque, is that the one I'm thinking of?
Burlesque, yes.
Burlesque, okay.
I don't think that they can make a comeback in this modern environment. I don't think that we are primed for it at the moment.
So where do musicians who want to be actors go next?
I think they have to go in the Harry Styles direction. You need to become a dramatic actor now.
I wonder why the trend is to be dramatic and to be serious. Not, why can't they be in comedies? Why can't they be self-aware and making fun of themselves?
But I think part of the problem might be that being a comedian is rather difficult for a lot of people, and they might not be skilled enough to do that on screen. So I imagine that that's the problem. And I'm not saying that dramatic acting is easy. It's a walk in the park. But I imagine that it's more easy to sort of slip into something like that than to try to headline a major comedy.
Because audiences are also very fickle and cruel. We won't say, well, good try. That was a nice wink. That was a humorous and entertainment. We want to, really tear somebody apart. No, it's awful. Stay in your lane. Do what you want to do. Just don't quit your day job. Is that the general consensus? Musicians should stay in their lane?
I think so. And I do think there's the concern that, you're overexposed if you're working in too many different disciplines. And you never want that, because then people start to resent you.
Did you write about any of these classic musicals at InSession Film? I don't think you did.
I didn't, no.
I think I wrote ages ago on my own blog about Guys and Dolls. I think we've discussed before. I love-hate relationship with that film. But I guess great example of a studio putting a star in a film and saying sing and having to kind of fix it in post-production. But that's a whole other story. I love-hate relationship with Guys and Dolls. Zita, you are at Zita_short and
yes.
The 300 Passions podcast.
At 300 Passions on Twitter.
Okay. Yeah, Twitter, whatever the heck is happening with Twitter. At In Session Film is where you could follow along on our main flagship podcast, where you can see usually the weekends is when we kind of come out. And the main show, you can also see the folks on YouTube as well. They have Patreon, and you can read what we've written about some of these musical things, some of these lists at InSessionFilm.com. Zita, thank you for being here. I'm Kirstin Battestella at
Thank you, Kirstin.
Thank you. We have lots of things in store, lots of crazy things afoot happening. So it's really great when we see all kinds of likes and shares and retweets and comments. Thank you very much to those of you out there who are listening. Yay, we love you. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you at the next Women in Session.
One Mississippi, two Mississippi.
Keep counting at those stop signs, Alex, full stop, and doesn't go until she counts to 5, McSweeney. Because you are a safe driver. And like most drivers who sign up for Snapshot from Progressive, which customizes your rate for how and how much you drive, you could earn a discount for your good driving. So don't turn into an Alex rolling stop and goes whenever she wants, McSweeney. Because once an Alex full stop and doesn't go until she counts to 5, McSweeney, always an Alex full stop. Well, you know the rest. Sign up for Snapshot today.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Snapshot not available in all states or from all agents.